What does a community association do? How do I stay involved in local politics? Why does shopping local matter? Engaged Citizen is a field guide for those curious about changing the way they engage with their local community. Each episode examines a popular concept through expert interviews delivered in layman's terms. Welcome to Engaged Citizen, an informative docuseries inspiring the next group of engaged citizens. Welcome to Engaged Citizen Episode 7. This episode is a recap of the series. We learned so much about what's required for a functioning, healthy, sustainable community and all the different roles that make that happen. I'd like to personally thank everyone who's involved in this series. It was such an honor to be a part of, and we learned such a great deal doing it, and I hope everyone feels more compelled to be engaged in their community. So, here we go. Episode 1. In this episode, I interviewed 3 different local politicians from different levels of government. First up was City Councillor Belinda Crowson. Can you explain the role of a councillor?
So councillors are basically the representatives of the community. We are elected every 4 years, and our job is to come here and on behalf of the community make decisions that oversees the governance of the city of Lethbridge. Both as a corporation, so we are the board of directors for the corporation, but we're also those community representatives who vote on behalf of the community on various decisions.
Second, MLA for Lethbridge West, Shannon Phillips.
So we have provincial representatives. There's 87 of us across the province, and your provincial government is responsible for your healthcare, education, most of the roads you drive on, most of the funding that goes into the city or town you live in or the rural municipality, social services, and most of the services that you interact with on a daily basis are at least in whole or in part funded and governed by the provincial government. So while the province funds municipalities and people understand municipal government as the closest to people, the fact is that most of those services trace their way back to the provincial government in some way, shape, or form.
And lastly, MP Rachel Thomas, who represents Lethbridge in the House of Commons.
For me, I view my role as being one that is focused on representation. And when I consider what that means, I think it's 2 parts. I think 1, it requires listening, and 2, it requires action. What are you going to do with what you heard? So for me, to listen, I often think of posture. I think of leaning in. I think of being close. I think of being engaged, maintaining eye contact with someone, really trying to understand their story or their concern, whatever it is that they're bringing to me. And it might be an individual, or it might be even a group within the community that's bringing something. And so my goal there is to really actively listen and understand. And the second part of my job then is, what am I going to do with that? What am I going to do with what I heard? And that's where I have a responsibility to take action. And so sometimes that looks like writing a letter to a minister. Sometimes that looks like making a phone call. Sometimes it looks like giving a speech in the House of Commons or bringing a study forward at committee. There's different actions that can be taken that hopefully serve the individual or the group or my entire constituency, well. Ultimately, as a member of Parliament, that's my job. My job is to make sure that their voice is represented in Parliament, to make sure that their concerns are taken care of to the best of my ability.
Each of these women were absolutely amazing to speak with. They're all crazy busy and work really, really hard to serve their community. Here's a couple of standouts from this episode. Number 1, these people had more in common than I thought. Partisanship has become such a big part of how we perceive politics. It was nice to put this aside and just talk about the nuts and bolts of how things work and what these 3 individuals care about in their position. Number 2, no one should ever perfectly align with the values of a political party. It's important to put your support behind the person or party closest to your viewpoints. You won't agree with everything, but that's democracy, and it's the best we got. Number 3, keep an eye on a politician's social media. You can learn a lot about a person by what they share on social media. Belinda has such a passion for local history, and it really shows. You can also discover a politician's public schedules through their social media platforms. These are a great chance to have a conversation with them and discuss your concerns in person. Episode 2. Episode 2 was all about community associations. We interviewed 2 board members of the London Road Community Association. Sharon Mahedin.
So I live in London Road because it's eclectic. And so we have this wide stratum of different folks with different levels of education, different levels of income, different ethnicities. So I like that it's not cookie cutter. That's important to me. The other thing I like is that it's very walkable to everything I need. So I can walk downtown, I can walk to the grocer, I can walk, to the library, to parks. So I like that. I like the fact that it's possesses the kind of homes that I want to live in. So I like living in a small house, so I can have a small house with a big yard, which appeals to me. And then of course it's just beautiful, like the trees and the green, and then what that brings with the birds and the parks. It's just a really lovely place.
And Linda Erickson.
I've done a fair amount of volunteering. Before we moved to Lethbridge, we lived in Coots. I was the deputy mayor there for 6 years, and as part of my role there, I was involved in a lot of nonprofit organizations. For example, I was the chair of the local library board in Coots, and then when I moved here, I became a member of the library board as well.
In this episode, I learned how a community association can act as a figurehead for a community and interact with local politicians in an effective manner. A good community group can be an asset for both the neighborhood it serves and the politicians who can use this group as an effective way to gauge the priorities of a community.
Today we share the story about a little group that makes a big difference. This episode is called Organizations That Matter. The group we are investigating is 100 Women Who Care, and they aren't a registered nonprofit or an official charity. It's simply a group of women who get together and take action. No frills, no fuss, very little bureaucracy. Just efficient results and a positive outcome. The rules are simple. Roughly 100 women in Lethbridge and the surrounding area get together for a brief evening of networking. They each bring $100. 3 local organizations or nonprofits are selected in advance and have a few minutes to make their case. At the end of the night, they vote and donate the total amount collected that evening, which averages $10,000 per event.
Episode 3 was titled Organizations That Matter, where we told the story about Lethbridge chapter of an organization called 100 Women Who Care. We interviewed chair and co-founder Sandra Asachuk, who allowed us to join her for the group's winter seasonal fundraiser. I had no idea this organization existed until shortly before we planned this episode. A contact had recommended we investigate 100 Women Lethbridge and touted some high praise for the organization.
100 Women Who Care is a fabulous idea, a fabulous concept. It is actually a worldwide alliance that has been put together. It was probably about 16 years ago, so November 2006, by a woman in Michigan who needed to raise some money really quickly, efficiently, and she thought of bringing together 100 women, asking them for $100 each, and donating that money to that charity of her choice at that time. So it is an efficient, quick way of raising money for some very worthy causes.
I was blown away by the event we attended. It was such an effective way to raise money for local charities, and they have a track record to prove it.
On December 6th, 2022, 100 Women Who Care gathered for their winter seasonal event at the Southminster United Church. The theme for the evening was Winter Wonderland. It was an appropriately cold evening, and we showed up to capture how the event unfolded. At 6:45, people started to shuffle through the doors, bundled in coats and winter attire. People had the chance to mingle and enjoy refreshments and live entertainment until 7:15. Guests were then educated on formalities of the evening before a guest speaker and a belly dancing demo from a local community member.
Episode 4. In episode 4, we zoned in on local media, focusing on Lethbridge's CKXU 88.3 FM. We got the nitty-gritty on the challenges of running a campus radio station, how things have changed in the age of streaming, and how campus radio is the true champion of the unsigned, underrepresented artist. Today's episode is on community media. We're talking about truly alternative radio stations, newspapers, or established blogs that use their voice to promote and amplify those outside of the mainstream. Hopefully, we can shed some light as to how community media directly influences local arts and culture and can act as an incubator and a tastemaker to promote local talent or movements unique to that regionally specific area. We spoke with music director Adriana Smith.
As music director, my job is to serve our volunteers, make music available to them, review the music that's sent into the station, make sure it is quality for broadcast. And as well, I also maintain our physical library, the archive of it, deciding what stays and what goes. There's only so much physical space we have. And other than that, I assist our local musicians with obtaining airtime at other stations, providing my perspective for their press kits if they want, doing mail-outs ourselves of our local music here in Lethbridge to other radio stations.
Executive Director Jenna Bourchier.
I like to say it's the non-fun parts of radio because it's a lot of the administrative, it's a lot of the background work that needs to be done for our licensing, for our reporting. We actually report to almost 10 different governing bodies annually, so there's a lot of regulations and a lot of licensing and a lot of financials that go into making sure we're still in good standing with all of those bodies. Not only are we an incorporated Alberta society, we're also a licensed FM broadcaster, so there's sort of expectations both provincially and federally that we need to stay pretty up to speed with. It's also my responsibility to source all of the grant funds for the station, so a big part of my job is sort of working with the staff to identify what potential grant funding needs we have, what programs we could potentially be looking to either continue or create. That's actually how Di's program, For the Record, came about. It sort of started, as he said, as a passion project, and we sort of looked at it when the pandemic was first starting, and we're like, this is something that's really special, and that's sort of my job in a nutshell is identifying the bits of the station that need additional attention, that need funding, that need administrative support, and working to solve those problems.
Community Content Curator and Friends Coordinator Di Hewson.
So my show is called For the Record. Highlights Alberta artists. Originally it was Alberta musicians, but lately I've been including like filmmakers, animators, sculptors. Like the gambit goes like get creatives. Yeah, just because it's like the best part of it is like having guests on and just talking about what they're doing and just hearing the passion about it, and then hopefully somebody else hears it and goes and checks it out. I think is the best thing. For the Record also brings in local musicians and does live sessions, like right here in the lobby, right where we're sitting. We set up, we record it with them, and then we provide the mixes back to them. So it's basically like a free studio session for a lot of these artists that wouldn't be able to get those opportunities, because like studio sessions are really expensive. And so then they have those, and those are like demo ready, or they can get them mastered and released, and they have that capacity to be able to get their music out there.
Episode 5. Episode 5 was all about the Lethbridge Public Library, my happy place. We spoke with Children's Services Library Technician Lori Darvo-Wilms and Adult Services Librarian Caroline Monahan on how the role of a library is continually changing and the different services offered to serve the needs of all citizens. This was an inspiring episode, and it really showed that the greatest strength of the concept of a library is that it serves all people, and the greatest challenge for a library is also that it serves all people.
Yeah, my name is Lori Darvo-Wilms, and I am Library Technician for Children's Services. So I work in the children's department. We serve 0 to 12-year-old children and their families. And as a library technician, I'm responsible for more of like the cataloging end of things as well as just the circulation department. I also do ordering, some collection development, and supplies, scheduling, things of that nature.
Yeah, so we have a lot of resources for people that are looking for, changing career development or just want to gain new skills with careers. We're lucky to have different online databases that people can go towards. We have one called Udemy that we recently got that has a lot of different courses that people can take. There's Excel, there's Photoshop, and people can take them at their own pace. If they do have a daytime job or something at night, they can take it whenever they have some free time, and then they get a certificate at the end that they can pass off to future employers. We have pretty big career sections in our library that we constantly are trying to add the newest materials so that people can brush up on some interviewing skills or want to look at a different trajectory in their career and find some resources that way. And then we're lucky enough to also offer like the Read On program, which offers for newer people to Canada some opportunity to practice some of like the language skills that they might have.
Episode 6. We capped off the series speaking to local songwriter Joel Stretch, who fronts the alt-country band Star Painter. Joel helped us gather an understanding of Lethbridge's unique and thriving arts community and some ideas as to why it generates so much talent for the relatively small size of the city. The artists that come out of a city act as representatives far and wide, and the economic effects of a thriving arts community are only recently being understood. Joel had lots of interesting ideas, and we were able to include 2 stellar live videos featuring singles from their new album, Rattlesnake Dream. Please check out the band Star Painter wherever you listen to music.
I don't think that Lethbridge has a specific sound. I think because the community is sort of small, the genres or musical styles seem to get less split up. Like I think in a big community, if you're a punk band, you can play with only punk bands and go to only punk shows, and there can kind of be like a subculture of that. But I think in Lethbridge, if anything, people are pretty open-minded to other styles of music than maybe what they play. Like you can go to a bill and there will maybe be a country band and a rock band and maybe like a spacey folk band or pop band or whatever, all playing together and going to each other's shows and genuinely appreciating what each other are doing because the community is quite small. That being said, I would say a lot of my favorite albums that have come out from around Lethbridge do have an element of like earthiness or sort of like rusticness where I think maybe the like dryness or barrenness of the land is reflected in the sound, or maybe in the lyrics, but more so in the sound. But that does kind of still, I would say, go beyond genre. Like I can think of some punk albums come to mind that I would describe as sort of like dry or earthy. Some like alt country albums come to mind that have that same sort of like sense of open space. And I think for me, I maybe project that because I live here and because I see those people around here. I imagine their music in that space. I'm not sure if that would come across to somebody not from Lethbridge, but I do see that as maybe like the through line